This is the 11th hour. With news and commentary for King James Bible believers, here's Greg Miller.
I want to make full disclosure from the very beginning of this video. I can only vote for one man who is running for president right now, and that is Ron Paul. I'm just being honest with you. But beyond that, I am making an appeal to those of you who call yourselves Bible-believing Christians, those of you who claim to believe the Bible, and ask you how in the world you can vote for Mitt Romney, a member of the Mormon cult who has pushed for abortion and for socialized medicine, or how you can vote for Newt Gingrich, who is a New Age convert to the Roman Catholic cult, or how you can vote for any of the other mainstream candidates, including Rick Perry, who has pushed for the North American Union to violate the sovereignty of the United States of America in Texas, for the Trans-Corridor Highway, which will allow foreigners to come and go without proper documentation in and out of this country, and on it goes. Watch Alex Jones's Endgame movie for more on Rick Perry that the world seems to forget. How in the world you can even vote for Michelle Bachmann, who I believe is probably a Christian lady, or Rick Santorum, who most likely is also a Roman Catholic? How can you vote for these people? You say, well, why? What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is their Middle East policy. I want to ask you a question. If you support any of these other candidates and you're opposed to Ron Paul's Middle East policy, are you completely ignorant? Do you have any idea what is going on? The Obama Middle East policy that is in effect right now is the same as that of George W. Bush. It's just on hold because of that so-called Arab Spring. And George W. Bush's policy was the roadmap to peace. And it was intended to give pieces of the land of Israel to terrorists for peace. How can you as a Christian say that you support this? You say, I don't support that. You do too. If you're voting for Romney, Gingrich, Perry, Bachmann, or Santorum, you are supporting the road map to peace. And every one of those candidates has sworn that they are going to continue this deadly anti-Israel policy that our nation has followed that is killing Israel. Genesis 12 says that those who bless Israel are blessed. Now, if you don't believe the Bible, turn me off. But if you believe the Bible, Genesis 12 says that those who bless Israel are blessed, and those who curse Israel are cursed. And America is cursed when we try to inflict the roadmap to peace on Israel. And if you don't think so, you need to read a book by John McTernan titled As America Has Done to Israel. And you'll see the disasters that happen every single time Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama curse Israel and try to force them to give away that land for peace. How can anyone consider the policies of Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama as anything but disastrous for Israel? Yet a vote for Romney, Gingrich, Perry, Bachmann, or Santorum is a vote to continue these deadly policies. I just want you to think about this. If you call yourself a Christian, I am amazed at the people who claim to even love Israel, and yet you support the policies that cause Israel to give away land, something that God has condemned. How can you do that? I would appreciate an email from some of you Romney, some of you Gingrich, some of you Santorum, some of you Perry, some of you Bachmann supporters, and explain to me how someone who's a born-again, Bible-believing Christian can support their Middle East policies, which are death to Israel. There's these accusations that Ron Paul is somehow anti-Israel. Anybody who says that is an ignoramus. And you tell your pastor I said that, if he's telling you that Ron Paul is anti-Israel. Nobody standing up in the pulpit should bear false witness against a friend of Israel. I am unashamedly a Christian Zionist. I believe in the right of Israel to that land. I fly 2 flags in my front yard, the American flag, and in the proper place right next to it, the Israeli flag. And I'm condemned by a lot of the ignoramus denominational Christians for doing that. I have the bumper sticker on my car with the flag of Israel saying, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. I support Israel. I vote pro-Israel, and I support Ron Paul. And if I can't vote for Ron Paul, I'm going to write in the only other person worthy of the office, and that's Donald Duck. Despite the lies of the establishment media and the Republican establishment, which includes Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck, despite those liars, Ron Paul's foreign policy is not that of George W. Bush, which Romney, Gingrich, Perry, Bachmann, Santorum are. Ron Paul's foreign policy is that of Ronald Reagan. Bush's neocon policies are not conservative. They're neoconservative. They are not constitutional. There has not been a declared war. And you Christian bums out there sit there with your eyes crossed saying, what does that matter? It's the Constitution. It's a good document. You ought to read it sometime. And to have Christians, Romans 13:1-4 says, God gave us our Constitution. And for George W. Bush to call it a GD piece of paper, and then some of you Christians supporting his policies, and a vote for Romney, a vote for Gingrich, a vote for Perry, a vote for Santorum, a vote for Bachmann is a vote for G.W. Bush's roadmap to peace. And Ron Paul's policies are even stronger for Israel than even Ronald Reagan's. If you go back and look, when Israel struck Iraq's nuclear program, Ron Paul supported Israel. The United Nations and even the Reagan administration condemned it. And you're going to say Ron Paul's anti-Israel? And he was one of the few voices in America that supported Israel's hit on Iraq's nuclear program. And then there's this question of the foreign aid issue. Again, ignoramuses run around saying, Ron Paul wants to cut off foreign aid to Israel. Yeah. Why? Do you realize that our foreign aid is double to Israel's enemies? We give Israel's enemies $5.6 billion, and that's from the last time statistics were available. We give Israel's enemies $5.6 billion, and we give Israel $2.4. Someone explain that math to me. How it is you give Israel's enemies twice as much money in billions of dollars to buy weapons to kill Israel, and how that is somehow a pro-Israel position that you're espousing as a good, informed, Bible-believing Christian, voting for a man or a woman who's going to continue these deadly anti-Israel policies? The fact is, Ron Paul agrees with the sentiment of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
My friends, you don't need to do nation building in Israel. We're already built. You don't need to export democracy to Israel. We've already got it. And you don't need to send American troops to Israel. We defend ourselves.
So you say, quote, why do we have this automatic commitment that we're going to send our kids and send our money endlessly to Israel? I think they're quite capable of taking care of themselves. Congressman Paul, with all due respect, that doesn't sound like a candidate who will realistically challenge for the Republican nomination.
Well, what you need to do is go and read the speech that Netanyahu gave on the House floor here just a couple of months ago. He says we don't need American troops. We can take care of ourselves. So that might be worth looking into it. We don't have a treaty with Israel, and we should be friends with Israel, and we should, trade with them and do all these things. But to commit another generation, we don't even have the right to do it. And if it's necessary to be involved in a war, the president doesn't make that decision. The people do it through a declaration of war in the Congress. I don't know what's so extreme about, following the rules and a little bit of decorum and being sensible about it. I worry about this carelessness of go to war anytime we want. That's our greatest problem, is we're involved in too many wars, and we should be very careful on how we go to wars. But if Netanyahu says that he doesn't need our troops over there, why am I not allowed to say that as well?
The facts are simple. If you love Israel, you cannot seriously continue to allow the Republican establishment to use you like a big sucker to elect rhinos and neocons who will strong-arm Israel into giving up land for peace. If you support Romney, Gingrich, Perry, Bachmann, or Santorum, and the establishment machine that supports them, you are supporting death to Israel, and you are killing the United States of America. God has promised that he will destroy all nations who divide the land of Israel. Quote, for behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and, listen closely, roadmap to peace, and parted my land. Joel 3, 1-2. Did you hear that? God is going to gather all nations who have parted the land of Israel, and he is going to destroy them, and that includes the United States of America, if the Christian right continues to support these insane policies and your support of the Romney, Gingrich, Perry, Bachmann, Santorum Republican establishment machine is going to make that happen. God bless Ron Paul.